From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined as always with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. Most specifically, that makes this week's listener mail segment. And we end every episode by telling you numerous ways to get into contact with us because you are the most important part of this show. And we take some time every week to bring your messages to your fellow listeners. We've got some weird ones here. So before we get started, there's a very important announcement, trigger warning, a disclaimer. We are dealing with disturbing, very mature themes. You will encounter descriptions of sexual violence in today's episode, so be warned, this may not be suitable for all audiences.
This is something that many of you have been hearing in the news lately. We've obviously been in a time that has been very challenging for a lot of folks in terms of the treatment of folks that are coming to this country from other countries. And some of the rhetoric behind that has been very strong, and some of the physical treatment and the, rounding up of children in camps, and the notion of images of kids being kept in cages and separated from their families, and, stuff that just has this real, just nasty dystopian kind of feel to it. And the story we're about to talk today is absolutely just an escalation of that in the worst, most invasive way one could imagine. Essentially, and this is all based on a whistleblower complaint, and it is under investigation. So I think, Ben, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but most of this is still falling under the category of allegedly. Would you agree?
So let's get into that a little further in depth. I
don't want to over caveat, but this is very sensitive stuff. The idea that the Department of Health and Human Services is investigating forced sterilizations, hysterectomies, being performed on immigrants in detainment, in a particular detainment center in Georgia. Our home state. Essentially a woman by the name of Dawn Wooten, who is a licensed practical nurse, submitted a 27 complaint and filed by Project South and the Government Accountability Project earlier this week, saying that she had heard reports from women in this center where she's working, this detainment center, saying that there had been a doctor coming around and essentially, without their permission, without consent, removing their uteruses, essentially, preventing them from ever having children.
Right. This is something that many of our fellow listeners have written in to ask us about, whether via social media, email, or our phone number. And there's one email in particular that was very to the point about this, correct?
That's right. It was Diana from Guatemala writing in just to say that she loves the show and was hoping that we would consider doing an episode on the allegations of ICE detention centers forcibly sterilizing women. I would agree, Ben, that this topic and a lot of the history that's wrapped up in this, because it's very triggering, brings to mind a lot of historical precedents that we'll talk about in a bit. But I think that it's possible that this might, as we follow the story, see where it leads, it might be worth a larger discussion, a full episode. But for now, I think we can kind of start the conversation here. So yeah, what we know thus far is what I said. There is a nurse who was reporting these occurrences of women in this detention center being forcibly sterilized, having hysterectomies performed on them. And it came from women essentially coming to her and feeling comfortable and saying very matter-of-factly, referring to this one particular doctor as the uterus man or something like that. Like, so there's some very, very dark, macabre, almost tongue-in-cheek kind of nickname that they had for this gentleman. Maybe Ben, you saw that. I think I heard that on NPR, and I'm forgive me if I'm not getting it quite right, but she heard it from others. Heard it from multiple people. Yeah, the uterus collector. That's right. Thanks, Doc. The uterus collector is what this gentleman's nickname was. Ben, what do we know about this doctor?
So we know several pieces of confirmed information about this doctor. Dr. Mahindra Amin, Amin. Dr. Amin is the number one person accused by Wooten of conducting these forced non-consensual hysterectomies. A hysterectomy is, in these situations, it is a permanent procedure. It's not like a vasectomy. You know what I mean? You can't realign the tubes and allow someone to enter the reproductive population once again. That is why this is largely considered, when proven, an indication of eugenics, of genocide. It qualifies as a war crime. This doctor is not an OBGYN. We know that. A spokesperson for the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology told the Daily Beast that this doctor was not board certified. Being board certified is typically a voluntary thing, a voluntary certification medical professionals take. This doctor did not do it. It did not in any way impede this doctor from conducting these alleged, and again, non-consensual hysterectomies. This is really recent news, by the way. We're recording this episode on September 21st. The whistleblower report came out in September, just earlier this month, and it's close to home for the stuff they don't want you to know family here, because it occurred, guess we do have to say allegedly, it occurred at the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia, which is a private entity. So please check out our earlier work on the problem with privatized prisons.
Now, this doctor who's received the brunt of these accusations denies it, and his lawyer made a statement saying that he looks forward to all the facts coming out. The accusations are going to be fully investigated by an independent office. However, ICE itself also disputes any of the implications that detainees are being used for, and this is the interesting somewhat telling part of the quote here: experimental medical procedures. I mean, at its heart, a hysterectomy or a this type of sterilization isn't really an experimental medical procedure. It's one that's very standard. I think it's interesting language. That's all I'm saying. And I do want to in a little bit talk about the history of government in the United States ordering experimental medical procedures that often affect people who are in minorities or people of color. But Matt, you had mentioned looking up some stats about laws surrounding this kind of thing in various parts of the country.
Yes, I want to talk about the history in the U.S. of laws that would essentially equate to sterilization abuse, really, is what it would be. Sterilizing someone against their will for a reason that the state has deemed would be appropriate. You have to go back to 1907 in Indiana when a law was passed there that was very much based on eugenics and essentially granting the right to sterilize someone that was seen not fit to be a part of the gene pool.
Someone with a low IQ, I believe, is then there were terms that were established that were associated with these different folks, correct?
There were. And it began there in Indiana in 1907, and then it trickled out into 30 plus other states within the United States. And with all of those laws that, went out there into the states, around, at least according to CNN, around 60,000 people were sterilized in procedures that would qualify as being compulsory or forced sterilizations.
The majority of whom were women, by the way, or if you want to, the majority of whom had female biological sex, given the misogyny of the time. I think it's also important to point out that the Nazi government took the results of this, took the statistics here from this practice that went on for decades, and used that data as a rationalization, or in their mind, an indication that non-consensual sterilization was both feasible and humane in the great mission to mold humans into whatever giving governments ephemeral idea of what a quote-unquote good person is supposed to be. This is something that should be very close to home to everyone listening to this show, or if this is a YouTube clip, to this YouTube clip. Forcible sterilization is occurring not just in the US, but in multiple parts of the world. We've talked at length about the ongoing mistreatment of people who are on the wrong side of the North Korean regime or government. We've also talked about ethnic minorities in the PRC in China. People are being forcibly sterilized, and they're being forcibly sterilized because we are past the point of the 1930s. We are past the point of Unit 731 in World War II, or the atrocities of the Nazi Party. Forced sterilization is never an accident. Forced sterilization at scale is by design, and it is by design shot like an arrow through the air toward a very specific goal or target. And that target is ultimately the eradication of a certain population based on their ethnicity, based on their perceived difference from a dominant majority.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we've seen that throughout history. Like, Matt, the research that you're referring to in the really disgusting part of our history as a country started off being white men that were being forcibly sterilized by and large. And they applied terms like feeble-minded or unfit to be part, like you said, unfit to be part of the gene pool. And it was mentally a form defective. Of eugenics. That's right. Mentally defective. But then it became much more focused from 1937 to 1966, by the way. Yikes. It was black women who were most likely to be forcibly sterilized by the government. And, you know, desegregation was happening. There was a sense of like, how do we shadow ban these people and keep them from, reproducing? There's no other way around it. It was absolutely based on racism and stereotypes around quote unquote mental fitness, to be part of society. And look, I don't want anyone to accuse us of jumping the gun or being alarmist about this one isolated case of this potentially rogue doctor who may not have even done these things. He's denying it. We'll let the facts fall where they may. But guys, I mean, we were talking a little bit off mic, and it sure feels like this has intention behind it.
Well, yeah, when there are clear historical examples that you can point to of the same thing happening or very, very similar things happening, it certainly lends it to feel, at least, as though there's more credence to the claims, even if they are as of yet unproven. That's certainly the way it feels with this. Although this is a topic that I think everyone is going to feel strongly about. And I would say 99% of people would be against this. I certainly hope so. But it feels as though something that is pulling at our emotional heartstrings. So I would just say personally, it makes me feel a bit cautious.
In what sense?
Just a bit when thinking about perhaps there's something more at play here. I think we have to keep that option open until it's proven.
Right.
And I would just say there has to be some kind of internal investigation or third-party investigation to see if any of these claims are true.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. One thing I respect about our whistleblower here, Ms. Wooten, if you are listening, is that there's not hyperbolic language in the report. It's a 27-page report, which you can find online. And in that, Wooten is clearly saying this occurs in the Irwin detention center. There are no sensationalistic nor alarmist claims about some sort of countrywide or nationwide sterilization initiative. And you're right, we have to be careful about the court of public opinion, because one problem with the court of public opinion is that it doesn't care whether it's right or wrong. Because, you print the headline one week, you print the retraction on page 32 the next week, right? But this is fundamentally, if it occurs, an unclean thing. Now, there's a great argument to be made, or a valid argument to be made, that even in the realm of medicine, mistakes can happen, right? Let's not forget that there are people who are lauded surgeons, medical professionals in their field, and even they have, for one doofy, innocent reason or another, accidentally sewn someone up and left a surgical instrument in them, right? What I'm saying is mistakes happen, but this is if all of this is true, and there is copious eyewitness, evidence or hearsay about this, if all of this is true, then that's a very, very specific kind of mistake to make over a very widespread amount of a population. You know what I mean? Like you can plausibly, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. You can plausibly fall into someone and bump them if you're walking by, right? You can lose your balance. But if you continue doing that, and every person that you, quote, accidentally fall into has strong demographic similarities, and eventually you have to ask, is this person really falling? Are they really making a mistake? Or are they pushing these people? And I'm not at all equivocating the gravity of those things. Pushing someone on the street because you're a jerk is a lot different from removing someone's ability to reproduce, effectively ending their genetic lineage on this planet. But that, to be clear, if these allegations are true, that is what we are talking about.
Yeah.
Well, and not to get overly political about it, but our amazing producer, Doc, pointed out off air that a lot of the folks that are supporting some of these camps, they consider themselves pro-life people, which is just an interesting thing to consider. I don't know. Again, I don't want to be too divisive here. We don't know all the facts yet, but if this is being pushed by some of these individuals, I would find that to be a very extreme example of hypocrisy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't mean to come off as though I'm not believing our whistleblower here. That is certainly not what I'm saying. I think I can sense how infuriated I am by the possibility that this is true. And I'm trained myself, and I think a lot of us have, to almost fight those feelings a little bit to try and remain a little more level-headed.
Sure.
So I'm going to read something from the CNN article. It's a quote from Alan Kraut, an immigration historian and professor with American University. He says, without evidence, I really hesitate to say, yeah, they're probably doing sterilizations just the way they used to in the 1920s. I'm not willing to say that. That's a really heavy-duty accusation, he says. And I think we should all be asking, is there any evidence of this? Not just rumor, not just he said, she said, but an investigation. There needs to be an investigation of who's been mistreated, how they've been mistreated, and whether or not there's anything to this, because it is extremely, extremely serious.
Right. It does not look good. I want to get in front of something really quick here. Matt, first off, I don't think you're in any way disparaging anybody here. I think we're being very fair about this. And I would like to also point out, one of the immediate questions is, why would someone get a hysterectomy, right? That's something that I think we skipped over, but I just want to be clear on this part. One of the big reasons that someone would be advised by their doctor to get a hysterectomy would be suffering from the condition known as endometriosis. It's a fairly common condition, and it's not very well understood. We know that it can strike women of any socioeconomic class or race or age or whatever categorical filter you want to put on there. Between 10 to 20% of women in the US of childbearing age have endometriosis. So the thing is, that's not like a contagious disease. You know what I mean? It's not like COVID. Like if you're trapped in a prison where COVID is rampant, then you're probably going to get it. But if you're imprisoned with people who have endometriosis, it doesn't mean you're going to get it too. You know what I mean? It's not as if these doctors are attempting to combat something that is spreading in the, once again, deplorable conditions in which these people are being imprisoned. I'm using the word imprisoned instead of detained. I don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, I think detained is a little dishonest at this point.
Certainly euphemistic.
Yeah. With that being said, what we can see happening, I would argue here, are 3 or 4 potential avenues for the future. First, perhaps with the best of intentions, this whistleblower turns out to be incorrect. On balance, that would be a good thing because it would mean that forcible sterilization is not occurring. And our second path would be it is confirmed in part, right? Some people have had this procedure done without their consent for one reason or another. The third would be, I'm getting increasingly dystopian here, the third would be confirmation that it's not only happening at Irwin, but it's happening at other detainment centers. The fourth would be that the story gets buried and becomes something that's talked about less and less. And that's frightening because consider that over, I think, the course of 1930 to 1970, like a third of people were biologically sexed female in Puerto Rico were sterilized forcibly. This is not science fiction. This is not some sort of cutesy, kitschy supervillain in a Bond movie thing. This is real. This is happening, at least in history and at least currently in other parts of the world. The big question is whether it's happening in the US as well.
If you want to do a little more digging into some of the really horrific past that we sometimes forget. Remember that range I was talking about earlier, 1966? That's not that long ago. I mean, our parents...
some of those laws weren't repealed until the 70s.
Exactly. And these things were actively mid to late 60s. You can dig into this horrific history yourselves. And we've actually done episodes on it on this very show on some of these experiments against the black community in particular, like Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiments, and the father of gynecology, which is a particularly horrific story, Marion Sims, who, has an incredibly checkered past and really kind of fine-tuned some of these methods that are used today by experimenting without anesthesia on black women. So, there's a horrific past even in something as simple as gynecology. And you can find those episodes if you just look up stuff they don't want you to know, human experimentation, stuff they don't want you to know, immortality, that talks about Henrietta Lacks and her fascinating genome and the way that was used without her consent. So there's really a lot that goes into this and a lot more digging to do. And I do think this is a story we're going to continue to follow and possibly do a longer deep dive episode into in the future.
Yes, and we will return after a quick word from our sponsor. All right, and we're back. And from here, we're going to jump to a call that we got from an anonymous person about a subject that you're about to find out what it is. Let's just listen.
Hey, I think I got something for you guys. It's about it's a virus or malware called EternalBlue. There was a group called the Shadow Brokers that actually broke into the NSA and released EternalBlue, became known to a bunch of people. And Microsoft today, 3 years later, has yet to find a permanent fix for it. They release patches, but it continues to be a thing. People still use it to this day. And I'm just wondering if you guys might want to take a look into it and see why Microsoft has still not found a good fix for it. All right. Have a good day, guys.
Oh, this is a good one. Anonymous caller, right, Matt? This is an anonymous one?
Yes, as far as I can tell, unless there's some kind of secret code within the zeros and ones there.
Oh, I love it. Okay, yeah. So it's kind of a live by the sword, die by the sword sort of thing, because the NSA created this. This is the equivalent of stealing a top secret military craft and then having it fly around cities with nobody on the ground being able to stop it. It's strange because if we talk a little bit about how it works without getting too in the weeds, you can read all this now. Everybody understands kind of how this thing works or what it does. What Microsoft doesn't understand yet, years on, is how to stop it from doing what it likes to do. There's a vulnerability in SMB, or Server Message Block Protocol, and that is what EternalBlue exploits. Part of the reason, arguably, that Microsoft is not yet 100% able to combat this is that the NSA got one of their secrets stolen. So they didn't tell Microsoft about it when it got stolen. That's like imagine if we were in charge of werewolves and we didn't want anybody to know. And some werewolves got loose and we're like, we could save people's lives, but then everybody would know we had werewolves. And we spent years saying maybe they'll just think they're coyote attacks.
It's not a good look. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny too, even in the reporting about it uses the word leaked rather than stolen, which I think is telling in and of itself. It's almost like the onus is not on the NSA for having lost something or having been infiltrated. It was some bad actor from within the organization that purposefully leaked it to try to humiliate them or something. I don't know. But yeah, it turns out it's basically a weaponized line of code that operates in the same way that other lines of code in Microsoft operating system are. And it's essentially welcomed into the ecosystem. And then it does just what you said, very effectively exploits this weakness in that protocol. And what's the outcome, Ben? What's the desired, like, is it about stealing information? Is it about just jacking up people's computer experiences? Like, what's the goal here? And what have people been experiencing when they're infected by this malware?
Well, specifically, it can freeze computers en masse. It can disrupt, it can disrupt infrastructure services. I think in 2019, there's a pretty great New York Times article about this that details how Baltimore was brought to a screeching halt by EternalBlue. Water bills couldn't be sent out, health alerts, real estate sales were disrupted. It's strange because the good people of Baltimore pay their taxes, and their taxes were used to create this thing, EternalBlue. And what'd you say, Matt? It was 2017 they lost control of the tool?
Yeah, it was April 2017, I guess, when it was leaked.
So 2017, there have been patches, as you said, Anonymous. There have been multiple patches released, but the problem is once this thing got out into the world, other capable state actors started deploying it, using it to their advantage. Because really what it does is it allows you to manipulate this flaw in how these servers work, and this such that you are able to remotely execute any code you wish. And when you say this isn't just like some script kiddies off one of the chans, what I mean is North Korean government-paid hackers have been using this. Right. They used it in the WannaCry ransomware attacks, which might be familiar to some people.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because the NSA has essentially disavowed this whole thing. They've never actually actively said, yeah, that was us. Oops, sorry. Even though Microsoft has attributed it to the NSA, and this group of, I guess, hackers, the shadow brokers, released this in a series of releases. This was the fifth of a series of releases of supposed NSA tools, and we still don't know who the shadow brokers are. But yeah, I mean, as agencies like this tend to do, they're not exactly going to apologize. And like you said, Ben, it's more in their best interest just to leave it be, let somebody else take credit for it. But one thing I thought was interesting too is that EternalBlue, I believe, was first the name for the vulnerability in Windows. And then EternalBlue, the malware, was named after the vulnerability. And I don't know if this is the case, but I kind of picture it. Remember the blue screen of death? You know, when your computer just all of a sudden goes catatonic, and it's just that was exclusively a Microsoft thing. I've never really seen it on a Mac, but I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it. But I don't know. I'm just asking if you guys maybe have heard.
I've not heard. All of this makes me want to talk to Jonathan Strickland, because I fully don't understand some of the stuff that's happening here in the research stuff, or in the words that I'm attempting to synthesize and then spit back out at everybody here. I think I'm just a bit lost on whether or not EternalBlue was the exploit within the system, was the update, the security update, or was something else? Because I understand WannaCry, which was ransomware that was built to exploit the problem that was that EternalBlue was causing. But my mind I apologize. Maybe you're feeling this way out there. My mind just can't wrap around some of this.
Well, think about it this way. Okay, the way to explain it, I think maybe through comparison or metaphor, is this. Imagine that Microsoft Windows is a human body. And the way this body was built, unintentionally, it has a hole in the gut. And so they would start referring to this as the hole in the gut, right? And then someone said, hey, I figured out a way to, for some insidious reason, poke my finger in that hole in the gut because I'm a bad person. And then everybody starts calling that move hole in the gut. So that's what EternalBlue, that's kind of how, that's like the etymology of it. Because you're right, Noel, it was a system vulnerability in Windows OS.
So EternalBlue is the exploit itself.
EternalBlue is the exploit, and its name is a reference to the vulnerability.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That is a little confusing for sure.
Got it. That does help.
And it was the WannaCry, thing that brought this more to public attention, because that was a bit more of a high profile thing that made some news. But it had been being used for quite some time before, it was leaked in 2017. So people had kind of figured out how to use it properly, but Microsoft, but the NSA rather, like you said, Ben, had chosen just to kind of sit on their hands when they probably, if let's say there's a new poison that's making the rounds and killing people off, and the poison maker, rather than having the power to release an antibody or an antivenom or whatever, just says, just let him die off, and then we don't want to bring too much attention to ourselves. But the NSA absolutely probably could have helped. At the very least, helped Microsoft create more effective patches, because I think the throw here of the story is that Microsoft still doesn't fully know how to deal with it.
Right. I mean, it's state secrecy. There's a cost-benefit analysis here. If everybody knows we have werewolves, then what's the point of having werewolves? We lose the advantage. So think about how many operations, many likely illegal, the NSA would have compromised by assisting with this. Which is not, don't have any proof on that. I'm just saying there's logic that we can walk through here. The latest news I have on the NSA side of it is that earlier this month, they just checked in and they said they have no information on their ongoing probe into the identity of the shadow brokers. So they still say they haven't identified them.
Yeah. And just to give some context, as late as May of 2019, this exploit was still being exploited by people with nefarious ideas and goals. The city of Baltimore, according to the New York Times, in May of 2019, got large sections of their infrastructure shut down because their computers that were hooked up to things like health alerts, to water bills, real estate sales, like internal email servers within the local government there, they all got shut down because this exploit was used to mess with computers and cause them to be non-functioning. It's really intense that was still happening in 2019. It is confounding that there isn't some kind of fix or complete just redo of the operating system.
I have a proposition. What if there's a bit of PR mixed in here, right? Everybody, for a few years, many people in the industry and in the intelligence world were attempting to identify the shadow brokers, right? It's kind of like the search for the creator of Stuxnet. There may be an open secret that nobody's officially saying we know who created it. Or it may be like the polonium poisonings, right? That is definitely to send a message. There's PR there. So what if, and this is conspiratorial, I have no proof here, what if the shadow brokers are actually the NSA? What if the NSA is hunting for itself? Because this is a powerful statement. You know, if they're making a comment, then what a flex. Because if you know the NSA created this, and furthermore, if you think the NSA somehow purposefully leaked it, then your next step is to be very frightened of the stuff they decided not to leak. Again, no proof. And the biggest argument against this, I would say, is found in how EternalBlue was deployed in the Baltimore example we've mentioned a couple times now, in other examples like ransomware that is affecting private individuals, and I would say also things that are affecting U.S. businesses. We have a very pro-business government here in the U.S., very pro-private industry. So if you are the NSA and you do want to do this flex, and it's an open secret that you did it, admitting that puts you on the hook for like $400 million in losses for FedEx, $670 million in losses for Merck. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't, even if you perpetrated this kind of software false flag, you could never admit it. You would be buried under the court. Wait, nope, you're the NSA.
Yeah.
Probably still shouldn't admit it. For the record, I don't think it was the NSA. We've talked about this before. These organizations are huge. They're not monolithic, though. It could easily be a disgruntled group of employees, a faction. I mean, one of the craziest things that more people should be talking about in this murky genre of intelligence is that Uncle Sam has a very hard time hiring the kind of hackers, black hat and white hat alike, that it needs, because the funny story is, and no judgment on anyone for this, the funny story is that one of the reasons they're having a tough time hiring people at the federal level is because a lot of these people are pro-marijuana. And they can't get past the security test.
No, I thought they loosened those because they were not having any luck hiring those. I remember that story being out, and they sort of laxed those rules a little bit because they weren't getting people that were competitive with the folks that were actually doing the stuff, you know?
From what I understand, they loosened, but they didn't completely do away with.
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, that's the thing about hackers, right? Like they're very independent. I mean, they sort of like, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm being naive, but like the idea of hacker to me is someone who lives outside of the realm of, like, you know, society and is like some kind of maverick and going their own way and just trying to be independent and do things follow their own set of rules. There's sort of a code as opposed to programmers, you know, who are a little different. But, you know, to get someone who's legitimately an established hacker who's got the chops to compete with these folks, you're going to have to hire someone that's maybe not your typical government shill.
Agreed. I mean, I think I speak for a lot of us in the crowd today when I say that when you think of hackers, of course, you have to think of the breathtaking 1995 triumph of cinema.
Love it.
Known as Hackers. So
classic piece of work.
I just feel like at this point we're obligated to put in a pop culture reference to make this stuff less depressing and frightening. But to your point, Matt, with this, and to your point, anonymous caller, it sounds like there's not a solution. It sounds like whomever has let this out into the world, even if that person is even if that group, if the shadow brokers are identified and go to court and go to jail or go to prison or something like that, it's already out there. Too many other people have this now. And until there is a solid fix, there's absolutely no reason to think these attacks won't continue. You know what I mean? Every city could be Baltimore now.
Wow. Yeah. And you know what? I actually just searched news by date. People are still talking about EternalBlue right now because you're right, it is still occurring, and there are large swaths of computers getting shut down still in 2020 due to this thing. I did not realize that.
Mm-hmm. It's active. I would ask our fellow conspiracy realists in the audience, what, especially if you have expertise in this field, what do you think the future is for EternalBlue? What do you think the future is for these exploits? What other news do you think is going to hit the mainstream here? This is interesting, the industry of hacking. You know, the government of China does something very clever with their asymmetrical warfare, with the bot armies you hear about. We did some shows about this in the past. Those folks are technically just patriots. Think about that. They're just so motivated by their ideology that they are choosing to hack. This gives the government of China a succulent kind of plausible deniability, the umami of saying, we didn't tell them to do that. I think we can see a similar strategy playing out in the future. But also, what's he building in there? Tom Waits reference. It makes me wonder what else the NSA has up their sleeves, in their top hat.
Yeah, we'll find out in about 20 years or so.
They don't have to have anything in their top hat. They just have a plug that is all the stuff that you're looking at, and it goes into their system and it records it. And they've got one of those for every human being on the planet, or at least in this country.
Oh, and by the way, I'm glad you said that, Matt. By the way, it's been a long time. Shout out to Steve, our NSA intern, who has to watch and listen to all these things. Hope school's going well, Steve. And then also, let us know if ever there was a time to break your vow of silence, man. Why not 2020? I'm sure this episode is hilarious to everybody in the NSA listening. They're like, oh my God, EternalBlue. That was we made that in like 1986.
Surely they've made Steve a full agent by now, right? He's got to be pushing 40.
No.
Really? Intern
they
for
won't
life?
let him.
Always a bride, bridesmaid, never a bride? No, not, man, I'm sorry, Steve.
He loves weed way too much, I think.
Steve, we all know you're high right now.
Yeah. It's okay, Steve. I mean, that's kind of what this whole thing is about, and we appreciate you being there for us.
It's okay, Steve. I'm high too. Well, with that, what do you say we take a quick break and then we come back for a little more listener mail?
And we're back in more ways than one. What do we mean by being back on multiple levels? We mean that our YouTube channel is back. YouTube.com/conspiracy stuff, spelled the way it sounds. We've got a new format of videos that you may be familiar with now. We've got more stuff coming out in the future, but we have something we'd like to share for you now in a rapid fire way, and that is the golden halcyon world of YouTube comments that rarefied air.
Man.
My favorite part, Matt, had always been when someone would make a very excellent, salient point about, the transition of the gold standard and the interwar years. And then I would respond to them with, like, oh, all right. Sloppy Dingleberry 420XX. That's a great point about shifting between one financial medium to another. So what we thought we would do is just give you a cavalcade, real quick read of some of the YouTube comments that we have enjoyed on our recent videos.
Yes. And we're going to start with one off of, oh Lord, which video is this? This is the COVID-19 ghost ship tour video. And Fiddling While Rome Burns says, he's citing me talking at 103, and he says, You can see Spain from Dorset, apart from 1,000 miles of French mainland blocking the view. The Earth would have to be flat to see something like that far away on the horizon. Definitely something they don't want you to know. Fiddling while Rome burns. You, my friend, are absolutely right, because it is France and not Spain, and I misspoke and I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Matt, give yourself 30 lashes.
I know, but it is true. So kudos to a salient, scathing, and funny comment on YouTube.
I'm tackling ones from the clip about the ghost of Gibraltar, which was your story, Matt. And let's see, first we've got, I've never seen these guys, although I've listened to them for years, lol. I always imagined Ben as a guy in a black FBI type cap and sunglasses. I mean, that's not that far off. Partially hidden in the shadows. For some reason, glad to see him as a regular human. Lol. Okay. Ben, you vacillated between exactly what she described and said regular human, I have to say.
I assure you, he is not a regular human.
He's not a regular anything. He's extraordinary. No. Okay, bruh, they have returned at the turn of the tide. You got that right. That's from user The Conspiracist. Then we've got one from Phantom Claw, a name that I really love, talking about the story of the ghost of Gibraltar. This is one sad ghost story, but at least it has some kind of happy ending. To find out what that happy ending is, listen to the episode or watch the YouTube video. Let's see. Here, one last one from me for Ghost of Gibraltar. From Roger Scott Cathy. I remember reading somewhere that there was a mystery regarding how a certain animal on the rock got there, that it was difficult to account for their presence, and the tunnels came up. Think they were apes, maybe the Barbary apes, that they migrated via the tunnels. Matt, did you run into anything about Barbary apes migrating through the tunnels of Gibraltar in your research?
Oh, yeah. Totally, a ton of it, and I just forgot to add it in for time, so I'm sorry.
So many apes, so little time.
So here are, if it's all right, I'll just round out a couple before we end the show. Shout out to Tate Van Cleve, who responded to our YouTube clip on mass hysteria and the screaming girls of Malaysia. Tate, you raise an excellent point when you say, I think 5 to 10 years ago, I read of something similar, meaning mass hysteria. Well, just check out the episode. I read of something similar happening in South America, Brazil or Guatemala, perhaps. I think it was somewhere between 7th and 9th grade. A group of girls used a Ouija board, and they literally had to bring in several Catholic priests to do a mass exorcism because madness was spreading from girl to girl, where a total of approximately 50 or so young girls were exhibiting similar symptoms. I saw another commentator trying to implicate Islam as being the problem, but like I said, other similar instances in South America occurred where the kids were Catholic or Christian. If one of the other commenters is correct and this was a result of them messing around with the Ouija board, then I would say that would be the common factor in the similar incidents and not their chosen faith. Well, that and they were both young females, approximately the same age, but I'm not going to attempt to make that correlation. I like my ass just the way it is. We'll cut that last one.
Wait.
Do you want to leave it in?
I'm sorry. I was just laughing at the way you said it.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty fascinating point because we have to remember that other examples of similar outbreaks occur and they don't all occur in the Muslim world. You know what I mean? There's a wealth, there's a rich ecosystem of intervening variables there. And someone else, Holden Robbins, says, seems like attention-seeking behavior. If you live in a repressive society, I probably get a kick out of going nuts with everyone else. And then, it's interesting because there's a running thread for these videos regarding the use of a Ouija board. So let us know. Do you think the Ouija board is the way to pierce the veil between the living world and the world of the dead? Is it a mass marketed board game? Anyhow, they've got one other one from Kim Jong-un. We have a video called "Is Kim Jong-un in a Coma?" And shout out to Kim Jong-un, who responded on YouTube saying, yes, "I'm not in a coma."
Classic Kim Jong, always joshing around.
Is it a picture of Kim Jong-un or a picture of Kim Jong-il?
Oh, it is ill. I think you're right, dude. Yeah.
See? I don't know.
It's a picture of ill, but the screen name was Un.
I know.
So So, curiouser and curiouser.
Oh, wait, Ben, no. I have one more in here that I only read one comment. There's one I had to get to. It's from the same one, the COVID-19 Ghost Ship Tour. Oh no, did I already lose it? No. Cat on Crack says, I will let the strange news stuff slide for these short YouTube videos, but what's up with Australia and North Korea, Ben? I believe you had flags for both of these countries, or you had a map of Australia, perhaps, and a flag of North Korea. How do you respond?
Well, Cat on Crack, thank you so much for that astute and rather pointed question. That's our show for today.
Of course.
That's our show for today. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We want you to be a part of our next episode and our future listener mail segments. We want you to find us on youtube.com/conspiracy stuff. We want you to find us on the internet until we get black bagged or eternal blued or whatever happens. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram.
That's right. You can find us in all those places. On Facebook, if you wish, you can join our Facebook group. Here's Where It Gets Crazy. That's a fun place to hang out with all your fellow conspiracy realists. All you got to do is name a name, any name, not any name, but a name that implies recognition of what the show is, or, just a good sense of humor, just a general interest in critical thinking approaches to conspiracy theories, and then you're in. Lots of fun stuff there. You can also give us a call. We have a telephone number, 1-833-STDWYTK. Give us a call and you may be featured on this very episode. Not this one because it's over, but future installments of the listener mail edition of Stuff They Don't Want You to Know that is now coming at you weekly. Please let us know if you would like us to hold back your name, or if maybe you don't even want us to use your audio at all on the show. But we would love to, so let us know if that's okay with you.
And yes, if you're listening to this and only listening to this and you're not on the YouTube channel yet, please head on over to youtube.com/conspiracy stuff to check out all the new things we're posting there. It's a lot of us talking, but in the future, you may see some other things, some callbacks, some things that you're really looking for. We shall see.
It's true. But if you ever wanted to see a floating head connected to these voices in your ears, you can do that right now over at youtube.com/conspiracy stuff.
Right. And if you don't want to do any of those things, you still want to contact us, we have a good old-fashioned email. It is
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.